Okay, it's Women's History Month. So I want to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's women's underwear. I'm kind of obsessed with women's underwear. A little known fact is that women spent much of costume history going commando, in the words of Joey Tribbiani. Women did not wear underwear, at least we don't have documentation of women wearing underwear, from about the time of the fall of the Roman Empire until the 19th century. So we know that in Rome there was an underwear option. We have reliefs of athletes, gymnasts, and that sort of thing that show women wearing like a bandeau and a loincloth similar to what the men would have been wearing. And so even though we don't have like written accounts of women, yes, women wore underwear in history because the Romans didn't really record a lot of women's history at the time, which is a comment on their value to the society. We have these mosaics and these reliefs that show that there was an option. So I always think people are people. They're going to do what they do. And if there was an option, they probably employed it, right? So about the Middle Ages, with the rise of a little religion that we call Christianity, this practice definitely goes by the wayside. And so how do I know this? Again, it's not written down. Women did not wear underwear because history is not like that. But the sort of governing literature on which the religion of Christianity is based, namely that book called the Bible, has passages about this. And so the one that governs what women wear is Deuteronomy 22:5, which reads, "The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto Lord thy God." So yes, I was reading that off of my screen because I am not a devout Bible reader. But this verse is the key to a whole bunch of things that happens in Western civilization in this division of the genders. And it starts with clothing. So what is a male garment at the time? We have to back up a little bit because if you think about the Romans were, they wore a lot of draped garments. So you might be familiar with a toga and garments such as that. They did not wear a lot of cut and sewn garments. And what we recognize as pants are definitely a cut and sewn garment. I call them a bifurcated garment. I mean, other people do too, but I like to use that word. Bifurcated means divided between the legs. And in Roman times, bifurcated garments were associated with the cultures that the Romans had kind of pushed out of Europe so that they could take it over. They were considered barbarian cultures. So these are a lot of your older pre-Roman European groups, the Franks, the Germanic peoples, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Celts, the Saxons, all those kinds of groups of people. And they had a culture of cut and sewn garments. And the Romans felt like that made them lesser than. So as we move into the Middle Ages, though, and those groups start moving back into the area and taking over, and they are taking the world back from the Romans, but subscribing wholeheartedly to Christianity, which was a huge thing in the Middle Ages. Words. Christianity rules. And so the divided garment, the bifurcated garment becomes associated with men. So underwear for women is generally bifurcated. It's, divided between the legs. It covers up the genitals, that whole region. So fast forward through much of history, and we're talking centuries of women not wearing underwear. There's some evidence of women wearing underwear in the 18th century, in France particularly, croyables. and the merveilleuses, which were fashion rebels during the neoclassical era. They kind of took everything to extremes, and they like to push buttons. As we move into the Romantic era, there is a shift in gender roles. That a conservativeness takes over when Queen Victoria takes the throne that factors into all kinds of things. And gender roles become really continues. And the shortened skirts of the Romantic era, which were popular, you would see these little pantalettes sneak out and poke out towards the bottom of the dresses. Well, this was really considered scandalous because, that was a dude's garment and women weren't supposed to wear that. However, the gained acceptance as we move forward into the mid-Victorian era, as petticoats become replaced with hoop skirts to get these really huge shapes that become really popular, really fashionable. And the hoop skirts left a lot of space underneath the skirts, and they created a lot of really interesting problems. Namely, they put the woman in situations where she would possibly be exposing what was underneath her skirt. Unlike other prior periods where hooped understructures became a thing, the Renaissance, the Georgian era, they hoops in the 19th century could be worn by anybody. People working in the factories, people walking down the streets. Imagine, if you will, mid-century New York City. The streets and the sidewalks don't change because fashion does. And so suddenly you have all these women walking down the streets with these big old hoop skirts, and they're taking up a huge amount of space. They don't fit in carriages. They don't fit into buildings. And so one of the funniest phenomenon I find is, to get on public transportation, a woman is expected to take her hoop off and hang it off the back of the carriage before she gets inside, because if she was wearing it inside, there wasn't enough room for people. So this happens in stores. This happens all sorts of ways. So men really don't like the idea of their women showing off what's underneath their skirts. And one of the things that cements women having underwear are these hoop skirts. And so it suddenly becomes accepted for a woman to wear the pantalettes, formerly men's drawers, because they cover all of the, private bits when she takes off her hoop in public. They also, I'm trying to think of how to say this. The order of things that were put on, there was a real issue in the fact that you'd have to put the underwear on and then put your corset on. And so going about your day-to-day, it became really difficult to do things like, go to the bathroom, or, have relations with your husband. One of the reasons the pantalettes were not accepted at first was the fact that they created a barrier for gentlemen, because she would have to get undressed to be able to have access to, the lady bits. So when the pantalettes become accepted, they're actually crotchless. They are open between the legs. So this allowed for the lady to be able to use the restroom, but also allowed her husband to have access unfettered by the undergarments. So yes, by the time women finally get underwear as a staple to their everyday garments, it's crotchless. Victorians wore crotchless underwear.